Hello everybody, and welcome to a new video. It's an exciting one for me today. I get to talk about a new Atelier game, and that's happening more and more often. There's already been 2 released in the first half of this year alone. Koei Tecmo seems to be accelerating the release schedule for this series. But where you can put, I guess you could question the business judgment in such a packed schedule for the series. I certainly look forward to each one as a highlight of the year because it is by far my favourite JRPG series by a long distance. I did come to the series relatively late. I only discovered it with Atelier Lulua back on the PlayStation 3. But what I have lacked for in terms of longevity with the series, I have more than made up for with passion. These really are a highlight of the year for me every year. I play and replay them. Atelier Lulua, which I mentioned before, I have actually played through, played through it multiple times, but I've played through it on 3 different platforms because I have it on PlayStation 3, PlayStation Vita, and now Nintendo Switch as well. Actually 4 times, because I've also got a copy on PlayStation 4. But yeah, I just keep playing these through and replaying them, and they make me happy. I really do enjoy the style, and we'll get into that in a moment. But it's an exciting one because, you know, Atelier Lulua did get me into the series. This new one, Atelier Lulua, is actually a sequel to the first 3 Atelier games I played. So Atelier Lulua, Atelier Totori, and Atelier Maruru made up the Arland trilogy within the Atelier series. And Lulua is the 4th in that kind of world, that environment. It's a return to Arland after Koei Tecmo and Gust went on to make 2 more trilogies set in different worlds. So I never thought I'd get to play another Atelier Arland game. I thought they were done with the 3, but they've obviously come back to do another one, and I'm very happy about that. And I really love this game. I have a review going up on digitallydownloaded.net, so you can go and have a read of that if you want to read. It's an in-depth one, I can promise you that. But the long and short of it is, this is easily a 5-star game as far as I'm concerned. I've obviously talked about how much I love Gust RPGs in the past, but for me this is kind of the epitome of what I like to play with a Gust RPG, and it's just such a happy, pleasant game that it's impossible to kind of fault. Yes, it has flaws, but it's impossible to fault because of what it stands for and what it does. Now, if you haven't played an Atelier game before, boy, have you been missing out. Unfortunately, this one's probably not the one for you to start with. This game was very much developed with the fans of the original Arland trilogy in mind. So if you haven't played Lulua, Totori, and Maruru, then there's a lot of stuff you will miss in Lulua, unfortunately. The game is a self-contained story in that Lulua is obviously a new character. She's the daughter of Lulua, and this game is set a generation after the original Arland trilogy. But even though it is a self-contained story, there are just so many references back to those scenes and characters from previous games that we loved that this game definitely works as a kind of fan service for people that like those games. So you will miss a fair bit if you're not an existing fan, unfortunately. And that actually applies to the previous Atelier game released this year as well, Atelier Nelki, which was a simulation game, but again it brought characters in from the entire heritage of the Atelier series. This is the 20th year anniversary of Atelier, so Gust is obviously going pretty hard on the nostalgia with its releases this year. I'm hoping that the next Atelier is one that is designed to attract new fans again, because otherwise this series is going to fade, because it will slowly lose fans, and without new games to bring new fans in, it's just not going to continue on as a series. But that's neither here nor there. For people who are existing fans of Atelier, this is kind of like a dream game in so many ways. So yeah, this video, it's a very long introduction, but this video is really here to talk about what I love about Atelier and how all of that kind of applies to Lulua. So if you were to try and define what makes the Atelier series what it is, love it or hate it, it would probably be the word comfort. This is a very comfortable series. It's a very pleasant series, and the reason that it is so comfortable is it doesn't really have an antagonist. None of these games really have antagonists in the traditional sense. They have enemies and you have to do combat, and in fact these games are always carefully structured around traditional RPG approaches. So you'll fight enemies, you'll level up, you'll fight more powerful enemies as you go further, and you'll level up more, so you'll get more skills to deal with them. So it's a very traditional RPG in those kinds of structures, in the mechanical structures. But the narrative experience is very antagonist free. What is there instead is it's a kind of coming of age story. So in most Atelier games you play as a young girl who is kind of setting out on her first adventure as she learns the way of the world, her place within it, and what it means to be an alchemist. And what it means to be an alchemist is always very community focused. So these Atelier, these alchemist characters, they always kind of become the soul of the community that they're in, because they fulfill requests, they improve the area around them, they help the lives of everybody that they come across, and they're rewarded in kind. They become very well liked people within their communities. So it has that kind of very small community, helpful community vibe about it, and that is just very pleasant to experience, and so uncommon in RPGs and so uncommon in video games in general. So often video games want to push for something much more epic in tone, and something with a great antagonist to kind of overcome, which becomes a focus of the challenge. And the narrative as well is a challenge of going on this quest to overcome this great evil. To have a game that is willing to dial those things right back, so that it is just about the kind of the community, the personal stories, the interactions between various characters, it gives it a very different pace. Atelier games, I think a lot of people would find quite slow and even dull as a result of that. But if that pace kind of clicks with you, it has this great, pleasant, comfortable vibe, and really it kind of feels a bit like what I imagine it would be like to live in rural Japan, really. I've spent a lot of time traveling in Japan, as anybody who kind of listens to me regularly knows, and as part of that I've gone into the countryside and I've seen those kind of local communities and how they operate. I haven't stayed in one long enough to get a real sense of how the community comes together and how it behaves, but there is that overwhelming sense when you play these games that kind of community spirit is what they're modeled after, and it's pleasant. It really is just such a kind of pleasant, relaxing change of pace from the usual video game medium. The other thing I really love about Atelier games is the art style, which so perfectly complements the themes that I was just talking about. A lot of people look at the Atelier games in action and they think they look quite simple because character models look a little bit stiff, I guess. The engine is a little bit limited, and it's all quite low budget. Of course these are quite low budget games, they are obviously developed on very limited budgets, but what they do really well is, or what Gust does really well in particular, is they find incredible artists to provide the character designs. And because this game is so character driven, the design of that character is really important in terms of your connection to the game. So for this one and for the Arlan trilogy before, Koei Tecmo got an artist called Mel Kishida to come along and design the characters. And Mel Kishida also worked on Blue Reflection, if you played that one, which is another very similarly gorgeous game with gorgeous characters. But Mel Kishida's style is just so kind of elegant anime. These games are a little bit fan servicey in terms of the costumes and some of the dialogue and all of that kind of stuff. It's certainly not to the level of a Compile Heart title, for example, but there's a little bit of that in there. But what makes it quite enjoyable and different is that fan service is kind of subtle and it is elegantly done. So the characters still look quite graceful and beautiful. And I think that's a kind of unique talent of Mel. I don't see many other artists kind of doing that. His style is quite bold, as you can see. It's quite simple, but it's still graceful and it's still very vibrant and colourful and bright and pleasant and comfortable. So it really fits with the game and it's really accessible. You instantly fall in love with these characters within the first couple of minutes and you want to continue to play on with them. You want to see what happens to them. You want to see them on their journey. So a lot of the appeal of these games is really linked in with those characters, which is again why I guess Lulua doesn't really work for people who aren't existing fans of Atelier, because so many of the characters rely on you knowing who they are from their previous 30-40 hour adventures. So Lulua is new, but the rest of the characters are existing, and the game does rely on that a little bit. So, yeah, unfortunately, once again, not really a game for people who are new to the series. Now, for veterans of Atelier, there's a couple of things I guess I want to note about this one. Firstly, it is a step right back to the very traditional style of Atelier. It deliberately tries to be very much like the Arland original trilogy, warts and all, so it has the timer in there, which I know some people would rather see gone, and Koei Tecmo and Gust have experimented with removing the timer in some of the Atelier games, some of the later ones. It is in this one. It's also got a relatively simple alchemy system where you're not needing to link up the gems and all that kind of stuff that kind of came in with later titles. In this one, you just kind of mix ingredients, and then if those ingredients have properties, you can bring the properties across. It's very simple, it's very self-explained, and it's very traditional to the Atelier series. It is very much like what you got with Atelier Rorona, Totori, and Maruru. So again, this game is relying on, I guess, your love of those games to really connect with you this time around, which I think is fine. I really do think that as somebody who liked those games, I wanted to play another one like that, so I got that, especially when Koei Tecmo and Gust experimented so heavily with Nelki just previous, which was an entirely different genre, and it brought in simulation elements and all that kind of stuff. To have it go from that kind of super experimental title to this very traditional and simple one it's nice. It shows that Gust is perhaps struggling to find the next voice for Atelier, but it shows that the developer hasn't lost sight of what the series is about, what people loved about the series, and what people want to see in their games as well. So I like a developer that's willing to experiment and try different things while still keeping the heritage, staying true to the heritage of the game that, especially a long series that people have come to love over so many years now. I guess a final thing that I really love about Atelier games, and again applies to Lulua, is that it is relatively short. I'm kind of sick of JRPGs that are 100 hours long and really start to feel padded out because the developers have wanted to make this really long game so people can boast about how many hours they spent playing it, but have padded it out with stuff that isn't really necessary. And yes, I am talking about Persona 5 there in particular, but it applies to a lot of the other games in the genre. It's one of those genres where bloat is becoming a real problem to storytelling, but Atelier, I think, because of its limited budget, actually benefits from being shorter and to the point. You get in, you get to know the characters, you get to enjoy them, and then you get to move on before you have a chance to get sick of them, which I think is a great thing, and I think that's a real strength of the series. And another reason that I find them so playable, when I sit down to start an Atelier game, I know I'm not going to get bored of it before I get to the end, which is just what you need, really. So on every level, I've really enjoyed my time with Atelier Lulua, and like I said, I've got a review up on digitallydownloaded.net, which goes into it in even more detail. I hope that you give it a go. If you haven't played one of these games before, maybe not this one to start with. Luckily, the original trilogy is readily available on all modern consoles, but if you do happen to enjoy those, then do give this one a go, because it is an absolutely delightful game, and I just hope you get as hooked on Atelier as I have, because I would never have discovered it if it wasn't for a particularly negative review of Atelier Verona, which was negative, but in such a way that I thought I should probably give it a go. I did, and the rest is history. I know these games don't necessarily review spectacularly. I don't know what this one's going to go. I know that I'll probably have the highest review score on Metacritic and whatever, but it's not going to set the charts on fire. It's not going to set the review scores on fire, but I hope that some people keep discovering. I hope that people keep discovering this game, because niche as it is very comfortable, very enjoyable, and such a nice change of pace to other RPGs. And I think people do appreciate that on one level or another. So anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it was interesting enough, and I hope the review is interesting. If you do enjoy my stuff, please do consider backing me on Patreon. Even $1 a month is a huge help, and firstly, it's nice to know that people enjoy what I'm doing, but secondly, it helps me do more of these. So, the more invested I can get into it, the better the videos and the more frequent they are. So anyway, thanks very much, and we will see you at the next video.